There have been many cases where he's basically been treated as if he doesn't exist. They used the wrong photo for him. He tweeted out that every other campaign gets to have people who represent them on your shows, but with him, it has to be him personally. So when people on the left are starting to realize, oh, this isn't about Republican versus Democrat. This is about us versus them, and you could just as easily be a Democrat and be a them. Eyes are opening, and that is a very, very healthy phenomenon. I always say that the corporate press is the enemy of the people, and I think that's the moderate position.
This is the Rubin Report, and according to a Russian bot farm, I'm Dave Rubin. Quick reminder, guys, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which gives you a 5% chance of actually seeing our videos in the feed. Pretty good. Joining me today is the author of The New Right, the host of the You're Welcome podcast, and the man that I've dubbed the Willy Wonka of politics, Michael Malice. Welcome back to the Rubin Report.
Thanks so much.
Well, sir, where to start? I think your outfit.
Yeah.
It reminds me of somebody, a former guest. I didn't see you until 2 minutes ago. You walked in here wearing this gorgeous little thing.
Yeah, I've been known for this look for years.
Is that right?
All of a sudden, I get phone calls. Who's this woman, Tulsi, who's been dressing like you? She's so nuts. She even put a streak in her hair to pass as me even more. And I looked this up. She says she's from this state called Hawaii.
Yes.
I never heard this. There's a bunch of volcanoes in the middle of the Atlantic, and we're supposed to believe that this is a state. They live on volcanoes, rain of liquid metal, that they check the weather, and this is people. This is how they gerrymander the Electoral College. And now they're trying to say Guam's a state. Guam. I asked my friend, where's Guam? Find to me on the map. He points to this little island by the booth. That's Sicily.
You saying Guam?
Guam.
Guam?
Have you ever found... They're making up words and making them states. This is how the fake news media gets over it. Anyway, getting back to her campaign, I think she's great.
Yes.
I've been following her very closely, and I think it's reprehensible what's being done to people like Tulsi Gabbard, the congresswoman from so-called Hawaii, and all the other Democratic outliers. This is a wonderful change in our politics where so many people are realizing the nature of the enemy.
All right, so we're going to talk about all of that stuff. But because a huge portion of our people just listen to audio, I do feel that I have to describe what you're wearing.
Hunky.
You are in a white leisure suit.
It's a suit. This is a business suit. How's it a leisure suit?
That seems like a leisure suit. You look like Leisure Suit Larry, or you look like Larry from Three's Company, or something like that. Or
we can do this.
Or Don Johnson, or John Travolta.
Don Johnson, okay, yeah. White suit.
But this is very much the Tulsi Gabbard white suit.
No, this is the Michael Malice look that Tulsi Gabbard
appropriated.
Thank you.
Yes. No, okay, so you hit a whole bunch of stuff there. The reason that I wanted to have you back, because as you know, I find you to be one of the most interesting political thinkers out there. I do.
Thank you.
There you go.
It's
I'm paying you a
appreciated.
compliment right up front. You consistently strike me as someone that is always like really on what I would say is the forward fringe of what's happening culturally and politically and the whole shebang. So let's start where you just started there. That there suddenly seems to be a couple outliers with the Dems and the DNC or the powers that be or the gatekeepers or the New York Times or CNN or whatever else you want to call that, not too happy.
Yeah, for a long time, conservatives often get things wrong. And I criticize them very heavily on my Twitter, and when I speak of them, I do so with great love and affection. They have always argued that the media is a wing of the DNC. And what we're seeing recently now is it's more accurate to say that the DNC is a wing of the media. Because you'll see things like anyone who deviates, as you mentioned earlier, from basically the media's party line is crushed. Let's give an example. I'm a Democratic congressman, right? Let's suppose from Hawaii or or from a real state.
Some other magical
state that
place.
actually exists.
Yes.
And for 3 years, my constituents have heard CNN and MSNBC talk about Russia collusion, Trump's Hitler, Trump's this, Trump's that. How am I, as a politician, supposed to go back to my constituents and say, with a straight face, I think Trump's the worst president ever, I think he's a racist, concentration camps, despicable, he's ruined the presidency, but I don't think this is grounds for removing him from office. I don't have that space. So it's pretty clear who's the one who is leading the charge and who is following it. And for a long time, again, conservatives thought this was Republican versus Democrat. And now we're seeing that it's establishment versus outsider because we're seeing it how they treated Tulsi, we're seeing it how they treated Bernie, and Andrew Yang. That's the special one, because Andrew Yang is hardly some wide-eyed radical, right? He's a wonk. He's in many ways akin to Mitt Romney, in certain ways. He wears the math lapel pin. He wants people to succeed.
Yeah, he's a business guy and mostly a centrist.
Right.
Probably, or not probably, certainly way too big government for you, right?
Sure.
But at least you think he's a sort of functional human being and doesn't come out of the machine.
Right, and there have been many cases where he's basically been treated as if he doesn't exist. They used the wrong photo for him. He tweeted out that every other campaign gets to have people who represent them on your shows, but with him, it has to be him personally. So when people on the left are starting to realize, oh, this isn't about Republican versus Democrat. This is about us versus them, and you could just as easily be a Democrat and be a them. Eyes are opening, and that is a very, very healthy phenomenon. I always say that the corporate press is the enemy of the people, and I think that's the moderate position.
What is the corporate press, really? Like, what is the psychological makeup of the corporate press that causes this whole thing?
Sure. So basically what you have are the universities, and that's where the evil starts. And we've been trained since kindergarten in our government schools to regard the media as authoritative and as, hardworking people fighting for the little guy and trying to present the truth. Yet we see many, many examples of the little guy. Nicholas Sandmann is a very obvious example. Those cadets who were playing the circle game. Here's an easy example. The guy who photoshopped CNN into that GIF with Trump wrestling them, CNN said, "We reserve the right to sue you."
Yeah,
that's not
to hunt him down and destroy him for creating a meme. Yeah.
That's not looking out for the little guy. That's looking out for number one.
I've asked a bunch of guests this, but do you think there's a moment where something changed? Because it wasn't always this horrible.
It was.
Now I get it's being exposed now more because we can all immediately tweet out the truth the second they pump out the lie. But do you think there was some other seminal moment somewhere along the road?
It was always this horrible, and this is what conservatives don't appreciate. We all learned in high school about William Randolph Hearst, the Spanish-American War, Remember the Maine, and yellow journalism. And then they just kind of the record scratch, and now we're into today. I have a big thread on Twitter. Walter Duranty is the prime example. He was a New York Times man covering the Soviet Union. And while Stalin intentionally committed a genocide via starvation of Ukraine, the Holodomor, he was putting out dispatches all the time saying, there's no problem. If there is a problem, it is malevolent propaganda. He said the Russian people, it's a little tough, but they're tightening their belts. Tightening their belts is a very interesting idiom in this context. And what Stalin did to these people is, if you were a kulak, which meant landowner, but pretty soon meant anyone, if you had any food in your home, that was for the people. They ransacked your house and took it. And if you weren't starving, that's how they knew you were hiding food, and that's who they targeted. So they would beat people mercilessly. They would tear their house upside down, kick them out in the streets, to starve. And there was another reporter who, and going to this area was forbidden by the Soviet government. There was a reporter who jumped off the train, went to a few villages, reported back what was happening, these horrors, and Duranty was like, oh, he's just an anti-Soviet agitator. So this has been going on for a very long time. They've always been hardcore, I call them jihadis without the testosterone. They have been this is a very demented ideology that will do everything in its power to maintain its hold on power. And only now that they've been fact-checked in real time and called out on their tactics in real time are people realizing, oh, I'm just going to say one more point. It's not, I had this tweet yesterday, I said, it's not about the corruption, it's about the depravity. If it was just, hey, I'm hiring my brother and he's getting paid too much money to sit in his ass, no one would care.
Yeah, we know they do that, that's fine. We'd let that go. It's like zippity-dambity. Yeah.
This is about Amy Rohrbach and Jeffrey Epstein. When you have a network that knows that someone is engaged in the sexual trade of children, and their concern is not getting an interview with Meghan Markle. And when this is exposed, instead of coming clean, it's let's target the person who revealed this footage and get them fired at the network which they went to.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. But what do you think about the sort of psychological condition of these people? Like, when I watch all of these clips of CNN anchors saying the reverse of the truth, or Cuomo tweeting out that, look at the way the right attacks Greta Thunberg when he went after Nick Sandmann, or just, a kid, all of this nonsense, that they never stop. They seem completely psychologically unable to stop. And that strikes me as very weird. I sit with a lot of people. If you were to say something to me that was patently true, that was against what I believe, I would struggle with it. We would work it through. I would ask you some questions, but I know myself, I would probably change my mind if you made a compelling case. We now are in a point where there's a lot of compelling evidence that these people lie endlessly and nothing ever stops them.
I don't even know that I would use the word lie, and here's why. I talk about this heavily in the book. I regard what I call the evangelical left, these types. When you're an adherent to a fundamentalist creed, facts do not change your opinion. In fact, contradictory facts make you double down.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are talking to someone who is a hardcore creationist and you show them fossils, they're not going to wonder if creationism is wrong. They will regard this as evidence that their willpower and faith is correct, and this is just a test. And it's the exact same psychology. The contemporary, and I don't regard all leftists in this vein, I regard this specifically as these jihadi types. They have this vision that they are the ones who are going to save America and the world, and it's a degeneration of what happened 100 years ago called the social gospel, which was the premise that instead of an individual being saved, which is a basic premise of Christianity, it's the nation that has to be saved. However, when you have this worldview that a nation's soul can be saved, or the earth's soul can be saved, that means there is no space that is outside your purview. That means whatever someone watches, whatever someone does at home, anything aspect of your life is subject to their domination and control. So it is an absolute totalitarian worldview, and they admit it.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.